coming out of St. Louis, Missouri, and stunning NBA fans in the playoffs when he was only 20 years old. Jayson Tatum is yet another great player at a very, very young age, playing for an amazing organization that may definitely leave his mark and legacy on the game once he leaves and once he ties his shoes up for the last time. How you guys doing? It is Saturday, May 30th, 2020. In this quarantine, I'm James Sims, a student, a current Duke student. So of course, I like Jayson Tatum, so I'm gonna try as hard as I can to not be completely biased with what I say about how great of a player Jayson Tatum is, and I'm just gonna talk about how I think his career is gonna project based off what we've seen over the past few years since he's been in the limelight. So as far as people are aware of, at least the basketball fans, he was a top. He was a top 5, probably a top 3 prospect on almost every recruiting list for the class of 2016 for basketball, where he would eventually sign and go to Duke as one of the nation's top prospects, alongside the top recruited prospect in that class, who was Harry Giles, who had some knee problems eventually. So when Jayson Tatum got to Duke, he became the guy once he was no longer hurt. He was hurt the first couple of games. But once he came back, that was Grayson Allen's junior season, and Duke would go on at least to make it far into the tournament, where they would eventually get booted out. And in those games that he played, he would start 27 of the 29 games that he played in, where he averaged 16.8 points per game, 7.3 rebounds, 2 assists, over a steal and a block per game, shooting 45% from the field. He shot 34% from 3, and then he would go on to shoot 85% from the free throw line. So, at the end of the day, he took that Duke team. He did his best with that Duke team. But inside and out, especially with the team, the coaches, everything wasn't really clicking that year, and there were too many injuries thrown around, and there's just too much drama in and out of the locker room that Duke eventually didn't come through and win the championship. But that didn't stop NBA teams from eventually scouting and wanting to take him very, very high. In the 2017 NBA draft, where he was taken third behind Markelle Fultz and Lonzo Ball. Markelle Fultz was seen as one of the top college players, especially with what he's done at Washington, and Lonzo Ball had led UCLA incredibly deep into the tournament as the best all-around point guard in college basketball at the time. So the Lakers wanted to pick him, the hometown kid, over Jayson Tatum. So Jayson Tatum would end up being drafted by the Boston Celtics. And many people were curious as to why the Celtics would trade down from the number 1 pick to the number 3 pick to get Jayson Tatum, because they knew that the Sixers and the Lakers weren't eventually going to draft them. So they were able to drop down, get other picks, and then pick their future franchise player. Jayson Tatum, his first year, will really go on to average 14 points, 5 rebounds, and an assist. While starting in all 80 games that he played, shooting 48% from the field, 43% from 3, and he shot 83% from the free throw line. As he entered the playoffs, he was only 20 years old, and he would go on to at least play really well with the Celtics up until LeBron James and the Cavaliers beat them in the series, and they would eventually fall out. The next season, Jayson Tatum would come back for his age 20 season, averaging 16 points, 6 rebounds, 2.1 assists, while starting and playing in the 79 games for the Boston Celtics. And that was kind of a tricky season with Kyrie Irving playing there. It was really kind of tough as to see where the Celtics were really going. They eventually would fall in the playoffs, and it was really kind of the Bucks and the Raptors and the Sixers league at that time. And the Celtics were really kind of doing their best to keep their head above water. And Jayson Tatum was having some impressive playoff performances. But at the end of the day, the Celtics just weren't the best built team for the playoffs, and it really showed. And then this season, they got Kemba Walker to that 2019-20, and this season, even he ended off on an amazing tear, but for the season, he would average 23.6 points, 7.1 rebounds, 2.9 assists, while shooting 45% from the field. He would shoot 40% from 3, and 81% from the free throw line. So he was doing really what he could from all angles. He'd also go on to average 1.4 steals and almost a full block a game. So that's really what Jayson Tatum has done this year. The Boston Celtics are now sitting at the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference in the middle of this quarantine. That's currently where they're ranked right now. And Jayson Tatum has grown to be, if not the best, the second best player, most well-rounded player on that team, to Kemba Walker, another player who I also have on this list. The way I rated Jayson Tatum, I rated him as a I rated him as an elite level player, possibly a franchise caliber player, but I don't know if he's going to be the best, one of the best. I don't know if he's going to be the best player of his era eventually, but he's definitely one of these players where he has a very competent organization with a competent front office that can definitely build around him moving forward. And I like the way that they're progressing. And considering out of all the young players they have, Jayson Tatum this season was the only player that wasn't Kemba Walker to eventually make the Eastern or to become an All-Star this season. Of course, I'm very, very proud for Jayson Tatum in that respect. He's done everything he could. He's definitely worked his butt off to get to the very point that he's at right now, and I know he's going to get a lot better considering he's only 22, a couple months older than Trae Young. He's only a year older than I am, and he's already establishing himself as the next centerpiece for the Boston Celtics, especially in this next decade. Because with the organization that he's on, unless they get really bad, I don't see Jayson Tatum leaving the Boston Celtics to play for any other team. The fans love him in Boston. The organization loves him in Boston. From what it looks like Jayson Tatum loves Boston. So that's really kind of the situation there. He also has running mates Jaylen Brown to play next to, Semi Ojeleye, Marcus Smart. Gordon Hayward for now, Grant Williams, Romeo Langford, Robert Williams, Daniel Tice, and who's my guy? Taco Fall. They're all in this. That's all the Celtics organization. They are incredibly young alongside Kemba Walker. And within the next few seasons, they are playoff contenders. But my question is, will they be able to improve to the point where there's a window where they might be the best chance, they may be the best team in the East with the best chance of making it to the finals with Jayson Tatum as their best player? Of course, competition would be Trae Young and the Hawks if the Hawks core really comes together, but they're a lot younger than the Celtics core. And you have the Heat. You have the Heat core, which is kind of better. It's better than the Hawks organization, right? Where it's kind of similar to the Celtics, where they have a couple of young players, but overall it's just a really deep team packed with even like veterans kind of in their prime. So you never know when I don't know when the Celtics window for a championship is really gonna come. Because you never really know. But I know that this season the Celtics are going to be a playoff team, a very formidable playoff team. And if Jayson Tatum's not going to be the best player, he's going to be the second best player in his age 23 season, and on a top 3 team in the West, on a top 3 team in the East, which is a lot more than some other young players his age can say. I think when it's all said and done, he'll have a lot of playoff wins, a lot of impressive playoff series. He might even win a championship or two as the best player of a team. And I think a lot of what he gets by on is just because, of course, he's an amazing shooter. He has amazing mechanics, and he has amazing footwork. I think his intelligence will carry him a lot farther than his athleticism will. He's sort of in the same boat, but a better boat than Luka Doncic, who definitely doesn't have the body, the speed, the quickness, the agility. He has the agility, but he doesn't have the speed, the quickness, and the strength to keep up with other NBA players. I think Jayson Tatum has the size, but I don't think he's necessarily quick enough to keep up with some of the top players at his position at small forward. He's incredibly tall, but he can't move like KD, or he's not as strong. Giannis might run through him, or he's not as dominant as LeBron. But I really like the kind of player that he is. I guess I like the historical comps that people are comparing him. They're saying he's a more complete Paul Pierce, and I think that's pretty fair. I watch Paul Pierce play. I think he's amazing. I like what he's done with this Boston Celtics organization. As an analyst, I don't know, but at the end of the day, he was an amazing Celtics great who would finish his career with a championship won for the city of Boston, which is something I can say is very possible in Jayson Tatum's future if he decides to stay with Boston. Or if he decides to go somewhere else, I can see him win. He's one of the few players where I don't know if he can be the best. I don't know if he can go to any team in the NBA and be their best player. but he's definitely the best player on a majority of teams in the NBA, at least when he's at his best. So that's kind of the range where he's in right now. Just as an NBA fan, I know a lot of NBA fans love watching Jayson Tatum, and I love watching him too. I really, really love what he can do. Just based off what he's done and shown how he's been an elite player for his age since he was a high school prospect looking to before he even went to Duke. People were aware of how good and how smooth he was. People saw it at Duke. People saw it, and then people have watched him kind of grow into the young star that he is in Boston. So I'm just going to end off by saying he's yet another player who's not one of the NBA's elite right now. I wouldn't say he's a top 10, top 20 player. I don't think he's going to be an NBA starter this upcoming or an all-star starter this upcoming season. But I think that day will eventually come. And if you ever get a chance to watch basketball and you don't watch Jayson Tatum enough, here's my advertisement just saying, I would watch Jayson Tatum a bit more because he, as an individual, is a very elite basketball player. And by watching him play, you'll see why the city of Boston loves this kid as much as I do. I mean, I go to Duke, so I mean, I've already seen what Jayson Tatum has done for Duke by itself, and I was aware of what he was doing when he first got to Boston, because that's when I first got to Duke, because he was a one and done. He was a year ahead of me, so that's kind of where I stand. And with that, I'm going to sign off. I appreciate you for listening to this entire thing. Just get a chance to watch Jayson Tatum play for the Boston Celtics. He's number 0, light-skinned dude. Pretty good. He's a pretty good baller. But with that, I'm going to sign off by saying peace.